There is a reason you are hearing this right now. This is not coincidence. This is not random scrolling. This is interruption. Archangel Michael is speaking with extreme urgency because something has been operating against your finances in silence. A hidden spiritual resistance. A curse that does not shout, but slowly drains and delays. It hurts. It devours. And heaven is not whispering today. Heaven is sounding an alarm. There is a 90-second window, not symbolic, not poetic, but spiritually decisive. In the spirit realm, moments determine momentum. Decisions determine direction. And hesitation can determine destiny. Why 90 seconds? Because there are moments when alignment must be immediate, when recognition must be instant, when agreement must shift without delay. What has been stealing from you has relied on one thing: distraction. If you miss the interruption, the cycle continues. If you ignore the warning, the pattern deepens. Look at your financial history. Have you noticed repetition? Money comes in, and suddenly something unexpected takes it out. Opportunities appear, and then collapse without explanation. Progress begins, and then resistance rises. This is not always poor planning. This is not always lack of effort. Sometimes it is spiritual interference. And when spiritual interference is ignored long enough, it begins to feel normal. That is the danger. Because what feels normal can actually be a curse that has settled into routine. A quiet agreement with limitation. A solid acceptance of less than what heaven intended. Archangel Michael does not interrupt without cause. When divine urgency breaks through, it means a threshold has been reached. A line has been crossed. A decision must be made. You are at a crossroads. Not years from now, not someday, but now. The next 90 seconds represent awareness, agreement, action. This is the moment to recognize that poverty was never written into your destiny. Scarcity was never your inheritance. Struggle was never your final chapter. But here is the sobering truth. If this warning is brushed aside, if this stirring in your spirit is silenced, if this interruption is treated as noise, then the cycle is allowed to continue unchecked. Heaven does not force intervention. It announces it. And right now, the announcement has reached you. This is your wake-up moment. This is your interruption. This is your 90-second turning point. There are financial struggles that are obvious. Shrinking balances, mounting bills, missed payments. But there are also financial battles that are far less visible. These are the ones that repeat, the ones that follow you, the ones that seem to activate the moment progress begins. Archangel Michael reveals that a curse destroying finances rarely appears as one catastrophic event. Instead, it hides inside cycles. You start to rise. You begin to rebuild. Something finally moves in your favor. And then suddenly, without warning, something drains it. An emergency expense. A broken agreement. A delayed payment. A lost opportunity. It is not just the event itself that signals spiritual interference. It is the pattern. Over time, repetition becomes familiar. Familiarity becomes expectation, and expectation becomes agreement. That is where the danger deepens. When you begin to say, "This always happens to me," or "I can never get ahead," those words may feel like frustration, but spiritually they can become permissions. Archangel Michael warns that spoken beliefs create alignment. When disappointment becomes your internal script, it reinforces the very cycle you are trying to escape. The curse does not need dramatic manifestations. It only needs quiet agreement. Many listening to this have worked diligently. You have budgeted carefully, prayed sincerely, sought advice, adjusted strategies. Yet something feels resistant, as if there is an invisible ceiling placed above your income. You increase your earnings, but your expenses mysteriously expand to match them. You make progress, but something unexpected erases it. You move forward, but you never quite break through. This is not always poor planning. This is not always lack of discipline. Sometimes it is spiritual leakage. You can reorganize numbers on a spreadsheet, but if there is an unseen legal door open, increase cannot accumulate. It drains as quickly as it flows. A curse targeting finances often manifests through chronic interruption. Opportunities come close but collapse at the last moment. Promotions seem promised but shift unexpectedly. Clients hesitate without clear reason. Projects stall without explanation. And beneath it all, there is an emotional undercurrent. Anxiety when increase approaches. Pay attention to that. If peace disappears the moment growth begins, that is not random emotion. It can be resistance attempting to keep you within the boundaries of what feels safe and familiar. For some, this pattern did not begin with you. You inherited it. You grew up hearing phrases of limitation repeated like background music. Money doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that. People like us don't get ahead. Those statements form an atmosphere, and atmospheres shape expectations. If scarcity surrounded you long enough, abundance can feel unnatural. When abundance feels unnatural, you unconsciously hesitate. You delay launching ideas. You underprice your skills. You shrink your vision. Not because you lack ability, but because increase feels foreign. A curse thrives in what feels normal. If struggle feels normal, you stop questioning it. If delay feels normal, you stop resisting it. And that is how poverty becomes permanent, not overnight, but through slow acceptance. Archangel Michael is speaking with urgency because acceptance is forming in places where resistance should rise. When disappointment is expected, you brace yourself for loss even before it happens. You anticipate the setback. You prepare emotionally for the collapse. That bracing posture reveals repeated impact, and repeated impact can signal targeted spiritual opposition. But here is the turning point. Recognition exposes concealment. The moment you identify the pattern, it loses its invisibility. The moment you refuse to agree with it, its hold begins to weaken. Awareness is not passive. Awareness is confrontation. That is why this message found you at this exact time. Because cycles cannot be cancelled until they are acknowledged. And if what you are hearing feels uncomfortably accurate, if it feels like your private financial history is being described, then this is not coincidence. This is intervention. Engage with this moment intentionally. Like this message as a declaration that you are done normalizing hidden financial battles. Share it with someone who has been silently fighting similar cycles. Subscribe and align yourself with a community that refuses to accept scarcity as destiny. This is not about visibility. It is about agreement. Agreement that poverty is not permanent. Agreement that spiritual interference will not go unchallenged. Agreement that awareness has arrived. Silence protects cycles. Alignment disrupts them. And what comes next will reveal why your response cannot be delayed. There are moments in the spiritual realm when timing is everything. Not because heaven is impatient, but because alignment has a window. Archangel Michael is revealing that the 90 seconds you were warned about are not symbolic exaggeration. They represent a decisive spiritual pivot, a point where awareness must immediately turn into agreement, and agreement must immediately turn into action. Throughout sacred history, Destiny shifted in moments of swift obedience. When the call came, hesitation determined outcomes. When the instruction was given, delay carried consequences. The spiritual realm responds to movement. It responds to declaration. It responds to decisive alignment. What it does not respond to is passive acknowledgement. You can hear a warning and still remain unchanged. You can feel conviction and still postpone action. But postponement is not neutral. Delay creates space. And in spiritual matters, space is rarely empty. When Archangel Michael speaks with extreme urgency, it is because something has reached a tipping point. A cycle has matured long enough. A pattern has repeated often enough. A drain has continued quietly long enough. And heaven recognizes that if interruption does not occur now, permanence begins to settle in. Poverty does not become permanent overnight. It becomes permanent through tolerated repetition, through accepted limitation, through repeated financial blows that are never spiritually addressed. The 90 seconds symbolize the breaking of tolerance. They symbolize the refusal to normalize what heaven never authorized. But here's the deeper revelation. Urgency is a test of agreement. When you feel urgency in your spirit, you are being invited to align instantly. Not emotionally, not fearfully, but decisively. The curse-destroying finances often relies on delay. It relies on you saying, "I'll deal with this later." It relies on spiritual procrastination. It relies on you recognizing the pattern but never formally renouncing it. The moment you say, "No more," with clarity and authority, something shifts. The unseen legal ground begins to shake. Because curses thrive where there is passive allowance. They weaken where there is conscious rejection. 90 seconds is enough time to declare cancellation. 90 seconds is enough time to revoke agreement. 90 seconds is enough time to realign your confession with divine provision instead of repeated loss. But hesitation is dangerous. If you sense this message pressing on you, that pressure is not anxiety, it is activation. It is the stirring of awareness. And awareness demands response. If you delay, the pattern continues uninterrupted. If you dismiss this as emotional intensity, the cycle regains its camouflage. Archangel Michael's urgency is protective, not punitive. It is the urgency of a guardian who sees a threat advancing. It is the urgency of a warrior who recognizes a legal breach. And what he is revealing is this: cycles become stronger when unchallenged. You may ask, what happens if I ignore this? Nothing dramatic at first. That is the deception. The pattern simply continues. The next opportunity still collapses. The next expected expense arrives. The next breakthrough still delays. And slowly, subtly, belief adjusts downward. Vision shrinks. Expectation lowers. That is how poverty becomes permanent. Not through one catastrophic event, but through cumulative surrender. But today, surrender is being reversed. You are not hearing this to feel pressured. You are hearing this to become decisive. There is power in immediate spiritual response. When you declare that you break agreement with lack, when you consciously reject cycles of loss, when you align your expectation with provision, something begins to realign in the unseen realm. This is why the 90 seconds matter. It is not about a stopwatch. It is about readiness. It is about whether you will let awareness pass or whether you will seize it. And as you feel this stirring, I need you to understand something deeply personal. This interruption is intentional. You were not randomly led here. There is precision in this timing. And what is about to be revealed next will expose the legal doorway that allowed this pattern to operate in the first place. You will be glad you remained attentive for what comes next. Before we move forward, we seal this moment. Type "I break the cycle" in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 144 is now activated. Now, as this urgency settles into your spirit, understand something sacred. This message is not simply information, it is seed. Every revelation released here is a light piercing financial darkness for countless souls. When you respond through super thanks, step into membership, or sow through PayPal using the link in the description or the PayPal QR code on your screen, you are not supporting a platform. You are fueling a spiritual rescue. The Lord declares, as you sow generously, you will reap generously. And that promise is not distant. It is alive and directed at you. I sense many saying within, I want to be part of setting others free. This is that moment. Your giving becomes oil that keeps this lamp burning, fire that carries this warning to homes silently battling lack. This is not a casual donation. It is a prophetic act of alignment. As you release your seed, may every financial chain around you weaken and every devourer lose ground. Act now and let your obedience speak in heaven. Now we must confront something deeper, something many avoid because it feels uncomfortable. If a curse has been operating against your finances, it did not enter randomly. In the spiritual realm, access requires agreement. Not always conscious agreement, but agreement nonetheless. Archangel Michael reveals that what destroys finances over time often gains entry through what can be called a legal doorway. This does not mean you intentionally invited loss. It means somewhere along the way, something aligned in a way that created permission. Spiritual laws are precise. Just as physical laws govern gravity and motion, spiritual laws govern authority and access. When fear becomes dominant, when negative declarations are repeated, when bitterness or resentment attaches to money, these states can form openings. The enemy does not need chaos to enter. He only needs consent, even subtle consent. Think back carefully. Were there moments when, in frustration, you declared that you would always struggle? Were there seasons when you envied others' prosperity and quietly resented your own position? Were there times you believed deep down that abundance was not meant for you? Beliefs matter. Words matter. Emotional agreements matter. Archangel Michael reveals that repeated declarations such as "I'll never get ahead" or "money always disappears" are not harmless expressions. Over time, they become spiritual signatures. They reinforce limitation. They anchor expectation to loss. And expectation shapes outcome more than most realize. Here is also the matter of fear. Fear surrounding finances is one of the most common legal doorways. When decisions are driven entirely by panic, when giving is resisted out of terror, when opportunity is avoided because failure feels inevitable, fear becomes a governing spirit. And whatever governs you influences what manifests around you. But there is another doorway that must be addressed: unresolved resentment tied to money. Resentment toward those who have more. Resentment toward past financial failures. Resentment toward family patterns of lack. Resentment binds you emotionally to what you dislike. And what you are emotionally bound to can remain spiritually active. If you resent wealth, even subconsciously, you may repel it. If you resent those who prosper, you may block your own increase without realizing it. Then there are generational agreements. Some families unknowingly pass down financial mindsets like inheritance. Statements repeated for decades become internalized truths. We are not business people. We are not investors. We survive. We don't thrive. Those phrases, spoken across generations, can create spiritual continuity. Not because they are mystical incantations, but because repeated belief solidifies into identity, and identity determines boundaries. If your identity is tied to struggle, breaking out feels like betrayal of familiarity. So even when opportunity appears, something inside resists stepping fully into it. Archangel Michael's urgency is connected to this revelation. The curse destroying finances often remains in place because the legal ground has never been revoked. You may have prayed for increase, but never renounced agreement with lack. You may have asked for blessing, but never canceled the words that authorize limitation. In spiritual matters, removal requires replacement. It is not enough to say, "I want abundance." You must also say, "I reject and revoke every agreement with poverty, fear, resentment, and inherited limitation." Cancellation must be intentional. Authority must be spoken. Alignment must be clear. And here is the powerful truth. Once legal ground is removed, the curse has nothing to stand on. It cannot remain where it has no permission. It cannot operate where authority hath been reclaimed. It cannot continue where agreement has been severed. But this requires honesty. You must examine your internal dialogue about money. You must confront your emotional posture toward prosperity. You must identify whether fear has been steering your financial decisions more than faith. This is not about shame. It is about clarity. Clarity restores authority. When you recognize the doorway, you can close it. When you identify the agreement, you can cancel it. When you acknowledge the belief, you can replace it. This is why awareness in the previous moments was critical. You cannot close a door you refuse to see. You cannot revoke a contract you deny exists. Archangel Michael stands as a guardian, but guardians defend what is claimed. If you have unconsciously surrendered territory through repeated agreement with lack, the territory must be reclaimed verbally and spiritually. And as we move forward, you will learn exactly how to sever those agreements decisively, not emotionally, not vaguely, but with clarity and authority. Because once the legal doorway is shut, the devourer loses access, and what has been draining can finally begin to accumulate. Here is a force that does not always steal loudly. It does not always announce itself with catastrophe. Sometimes it operates quietly, strategically, almost patiently. Archangel Michael identifies this force as the spirit of delay and the devourer, the unseen influence that consumes increase before it can establish stability. You may have experienced it without naming it. The devourer does not necessarily prevent income. Instead, it targets retention. It allows provision to arrive, but ensures it never remains. It creates scenarios where what you build is slowly eaten away. A sudden repair, an unexpected medical pause, a broken agreement, a last-minute cancellation. Just when growth begins to feel real, something consumes it. Over time, this creates exhaustion. Not just financial exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. You begin to feel as though building is pointless because something will eventually undo it. Motivation weakens. Vision shrinks. Risk feels dangerous. You start aiming lower, not because you lack potential, but because repeated loss has conditioned caution. This is how the devourer expands its influence. It does not only take resources, it reduces courage. Archangel Michael warns that delay is one of its most subtle weapons. Opportunities appear, but timing never aligns. Funds are promised, but release is postponed. Projects move forward, then stall without explanation. Momentum begins, then pauses. And while nothing seems dramatically wrong, progress is constantly suspended. Delay creates doubt. Doubt creates hesitation. Hesitation creates missed windows. and missed windows reinforce the illusion that increase is not meant for you. But the truth is far more strategic. The spirit of delay often activates strongest when breakthrough is closest. When you are about to step into expansion, resistance intensifies. Distractions increase. Conflicts arise. Unexpected complications surface. The goal is not merely to slow you, it is to discourage you into retreat. Have you noticed that some of your greatest financial opportunities were accompanied by unusual resistance? Strange misunderstandings, sudden fear, confusion that clouded clarity. That is not coincidence. When expansion threatens limitation, opposition reacts. The devourer also feeds on disorganization and overwhelm. When financial stress rises, clarity decreases. You may procrastinate decisions. You may avoid reviewing numbers. You may ignore planning because anxiety feels too heavy. In that state, small issues compound into larger ones, and the devourer thrives in that chaos. But here is the critical insight. The devourer cannot create. It can only consume. It has no power to generate blessing. It only distorts, delays, and drains what is already in motion. That means increase is possible. Provision is accessible. But something had been intercepting it. Archangel Michael's urgency is not meant to alarm you. It is meant to expose the pattern so you can confront it with authority. Consider how often financial growth in your life hath been short-lived. You receive a raise, but expenses expand. You pay off debt, but another obligation appears. You save, but something demands withdrawal. It feels cyclical, predictable, almost scripted. But predictability is the clue. If loss feels timed, if interruption feels patterned, then you are not dealing with randomness alone. You are dealing with targeted resistance. And here is where many make a critical mistake. They internalize the pattern as personal failure. They assume they are bad with money. They assume they lack discipline. They assume they are destined to struggle. That internalization strengthens the devourer's hold because it shifts focus away from spiritual confrontation. Ching paralyzes action. Archangel Michael makes it clear. This is not about condemnation. It is about recognition. Once you recognize the devourer's strategy, you stop blaming yourself for every interruption. You begin asking different questions. You begin guarding differently. You begin declaring differently. Delay must be confronted. Consumption must be reviewed. Cycles must be named. But understand this carefully. Confronting the devourer is not emotional shouting. It is structured authority. It is clear revocation of access. It is disciplined alignment moving forward. Because once the devourer loses legal ground, it cannot linger. And something else happens when it is removed. Peace replaces tension. Clarity replaces confusion. Stability replaces volatility. Instead of constantly repairing damage, you begin building forward. Instead of bracing for loss, you anticipate growth. That shift alone changes decisions, opportunities, and outcomes. You were not designed to live in constant financial recovery mode. You were not meant to repeatedly rebuild from scratch. You were not created to fear every increase. The spirit of delay and the devourer have operated long enough. In the next part, you will be guided step by step through the process of cancellation, how to formally revoke access, how to declare authority, and how to realign your finances under divine protection. Because exposure is only the beginning. Cancellation is next. Now we move from revelation to action. Exposure without cancellation leaves the door half open. Recognition without declaration leaves authority unused. Archangel Michael is not only revealing the curse, the legal doorway, and the devourer, he is now instructing you in how to cancel it. This is where the 90 seconds become real. Cancellation begins with deliberate verbal authority. In the spiritual realm, silence can imply consent, but speech establishes boundaries. What had been operating against your finances has relied on passive tolerance. It must now encounter direct resistance. First, you must consciously renounce every agreement with poverty. This is not symbolic language. This is precise alignment. You must declare, clearly and intentionally, that you revoke every word you have spoken that aligned you with lack. Every statement of permanent struggle, every confession of defeat, every belief that abundance was not meant for you. Say it with clarity. I cancel every agreement I have made with poverty, fear, limitation, and financial defeat. I revoke access. I withdraw permission. When you speak with conviction, you shift internal alignment. And when internal alignment shifts, external patterns begin to respond. Second, you must renounce fear as a governing force. Fear has influenced decisions. It has shaped timing. It has created hesitation. You must remove it from authority. Declare that fear will no longer dictate your financial posture. Declare that wisdom, not panic, will guide you. Fear thrives in silence. It weakens when exposed and confronted. Third, you must forgive past financial failures. This may seem unrelated, but it is critical. Shame anchors you to previous mistakes. It replays them internally. It keeps you identifying as someone who messes things up. That identity reinforces limitation. Forgiveness breaks identification with failure. It allows you to move forward without carrying emotional debt. Say clearly, I release myself from the weight of past financial mistakes. I receive wisdom without shame. Fourth, you must close generational agreements. If struggle has repeated in your family line, you must declare that the pattern stops with you. Not angrily, not arrogantly, but decisively. State that inherited limitation no longer defines your financial ceiling. Identity shifts when you consciously reject old narratives. Then comes activation. Cancellation removes legal ground. Activation establishes new ground. Begin declaring provision instead of lack. Not vague optimism, but firm expectation. Speak stability. Speak growth. Speak stewardship. Speak overflow with responsibility. The spiritual realm responds to sustained alignment, not one-time emotion. Your confession must match your desired outcome consistently. But hear this clearly. Declarations without discipline create imbalance. After cancellation, you must align your practical life with your spiritual declaration. Organize your finances. Confront avoidance. Create structure where chaos once existed. Seek wisdom where confusion ruled. The curse exploited disorder. Order weakens its return. Archangel Michael emphasizes that spiritual authority and practical wisdom work together. One without the other leaves vulnerability. When you combine declaration with disciplined action, you seal the door that was once open. And now, take a deep breath and imagine something with me. Imagine income arriving and remaining. Imagine opportunity appearing and expanding instead of collapsing. And I did not expect it explicit dig it instead of aggressive. Imagine peace replacing financial anxiety. That vision is not fantasy. It is alignment waiting to stabilize. But stability requires consistency. The cancellation process is not a single emotional moment. It is a shift in posture. Every time you are tempted to declare defeat, you choose differently. Every time fear attempts to dictate, you pause and realign. Every time shame whispers, you reject it. And here is the powerful truth. Once legal access is revoked and new alignment is established, the devourer loses authority. It cannot operate where permission hath been withdrawn. It cannot delay what is consistently reinforced with clarity and expectation. It cannot consume what is guarded intentionally. This is why the previous revelations were necessary. You had to see the pattern. You had to understand the doorway. You had to identify the devourer. And now you are equipped to cancel it. But something even deeper is about to unfold. Because while cancellation removes the curse, protection ensures it does not return. In the next part, you will confront the generational dimension fully and sever it at the root. What you are about to step into is not temporary relief. It is structural change. There is a level of financial struggle that does not begin with you. You may have thought it was personal. You may have assumed your difficulties were the result of your own decisions alone. But Archangel Michael now draws your attention to something deeper. The generational current that can quietly shape financial destiny long before you ever earn your first income. Patterns travel through families. Not just eye color. Not just personality traits. Patterns of belief. Patterns of fear. Patterns of limitation. If scarcity was the atmosphere in which your parents lived, and their parents before them, it can become the emotional baseline you inherited without realizing it. You might have grown up hearing constant phrases of lack. Statements repeated so often they felt like truth. We always struggle. Money never stays. People like us work hard but never get ahead. Those words were not merely observations. Over time, they became identity markers. Identity determines expectation. If your family identity was rooted in survival rather than expansion, you may unconsciously cap your own growth. When income increases, discomfort rises. When opportunity expands, self-doubt whispers. Not because you are incapable, but because you are stepping outside inherited familiarity. Generational poverty is not only about money. It is about mindset and spiritual agreement passed down without examination. Archangel Michael reveals that sometimes the curse-destroying finances is reinforced through repeated family narratives. Not because your ancestors intended harm, but because unchallenged limitation becomes tradition. And tradition can quietly harden into spiritual structure. Have you ever noticed how financial emergencies seem to echo across generations? The same types of debt. The same cycles of near breakthrough followed by collapse. The same fears surrounding risk. The same hesitancy to step into ownership or investment. When patterns repeat across decades, it is no longer coincidence. It is continuity. And continuity must be interrupted intentionally. This is where many hesitate. Breaking generational patterns can feel disloyal. It can feel like rejecting your roots. But hear this clearly. Severing limitation is not dishonoring your family. It is liberating your future lineage. You are not rejecting where you came from. You are refusing to pass forward what harmed those before you. Archangel Michael emphasizes that generational agreements lose power when consciously renounced. If your lineage normalized lack, you must declare that lack is no longer your identity. If your family operated under fear of money, you must reject fear as inheritance. If scarcity was expected, you must realign expectation toward provision. Say it clearly within yourself. What was tolerated before me will not continue through me. This declaration is not rebellion. It is restoration. But there is another layer, emotional loyalty. Sometimes you unconsciously limit yourself because surpassing your family feels uncomfortable. If no one in your family built wealth, becoming the first can feel isolating. You may downplay ambition. You may shrink vision. You may self-sabotage progress to remain emotionally aligned with familiar history. This is subtle, but it is powerful. Archangel Michael reveals that breaking generational poverty requires courage. It requires accepting that your ceiling can be higher than what you witnessed. It requires believing that expansion does not betray your origins, it redeems them. Imagine being the turning point. Imagine your children, or those who come after you, growing up without the same fear of bills, without the same anxiety over survival, without the same narratives of barely enough. That transformation does not happen accidentally. It happens because someone decided the cycle stops here. But breaking generational patterns requires more than motivation. It requires sustained alignment. You must replace inherited narratives with intentional ones. Where there was "we never have enough," you establish "we steward wisely and expect increase." Where there was "money disappears," you declare "what entereth my hands is protected and multiplied with wisdom." Where there was fear, you establish discipline. Where there was avoidance, you create structure. This is how generational curses are dismantled, through conscious replacement. And here is the empowering truth: you are not fighting alone. Archangel Michael stands as a defender not only of individuals, but of bloodlines. When you declare that the pattern ends with you, you activate protection over your future lineage. What tried to repeat through decades meets resistance in you. You become the interruption. You become the turning point. You become the evidence that cycles can be broken. And as you step into this realization, understand that generational cancellation is not merely about relief. It is about inheritance. What you establish now creates new normal for those connected to you. The next step is not only cancellation, it is protection. Because once the cycle is broken, it must be guarded. In the next part, you will learn how to establish a seal of protection over your finances, a perimeter that prevents re-entry and secures what is being restored. The pattern may have been old, but it does not have to continue. Breaking the cycle is powerful, but breaking it is not the final step. What is broken must be guarded. What is restored must be protected. Archangel Michael now speaks about establishing a seal, a perimeter of spiritual defense around your finances so that what has been canceled does not quietly attempt to return. In the spiritual realm, victory is not only about removal, it is about reinforcement. You have renounced agreements. You have confronted the devourer. You have severed generational patterns. Now you must establish protection over every stream of income, every opportunity, every resource that enters your hands. Archangel Michael is described as a warrior and guardian. His role is not passive. It is active defense. When you consciously invite divine protection over your finances, you are not engaging in fantasy. You are aligning with spiritual order. Protection follows authorization. Begin by declaring ownership with clarity. Not ownership rooted in pride, but stewardship rooted in responsibility. What you refuse to guard can be easily drained, but what you intelligently place under protection becomes yielded. Say within yourself, every income source connected to me is covered. Every opportunity assigned to me is protected. Every resource entrusted to me is guarded against loss and delay. These declarations are not superstition. They are alignment. They remind you that you are no longer passive in financial matters. You are alert. You are watchful. You are spiritually aware. Protection also requires discernment. Not every opportunity is aligned. Not every partnership is safe. Sometimes financial leakage occurs because you allowed access to the wrong influences. Archangel Michael's protection includes clarity, the ability to sense when something is misaligned before it costs you. Pay attention to inner warnings. Pay attention to unease that arises without clear reason. Protection often speaks quietly before damage occurs. Ignoring discernment can reopen doors that were just closed. Another aspect of seeing your finances is consistency and confession. After cancellation, you cannot return to old language. You cannot declare breakthrough one day and defeat the next. Words create atmosphere. Atmosphere influences expectation. Guard your confession as fiercely as you guard your accounts. If anxiety rises, counter it with truth. If fear whispers, answer with authority. Protection is sustained through consistency. Archangel Michael also emphasizes order as a shield. Disorganization invites vulnerability. When you avoid reviewing finances, when you neglect structure, when you delay wise planning, you create gaps. Those gaps can become entry points for unnecessary loss. Protection includes discipline. Organize what you have. Track what flows in and out. Plan intentionally. Seek counsel when needed. Wisdom is not separate from spirituality. It is part of it. When wisdom and spiritual authority combine, stability strengthens. But protection is not only defensive, it is preventative. Declare that future attacks will not find access. Declare that delays will not derail you. Declare that what is meant for you will not be intercepted. These are not empty affirmations. They are boundaries drawn in advance. And here is something critical. Protection must be renewed through gratitude. Gratitude keeps your focus on what is working rather than what is missing. When you consistently acknowledge provision, you reinforce its presence. Complaint weakens protection. Gratitude strengthens it. Now listen carefully. There is one final key that determines whether this breakthrough stabilizes or slowly fades. You have canceled. You have severed. You have sealed. But what you are about to understand next will determine whether increase accelerates or plateaus. You will be grateful you remained attentive for what is about to unfold. Before we move forward, seal this declaration publicly. Heaven defends my finances in the comments. Blessing code 318 is now activated. As this seal settles over your life, understand that this message is not meant to stop here. What protects you can also protect someone else. When you release a super thanks, join as a member, or so through PayPal using the link in the description or the QR code on your screen. You are extending this shield to households silently battling financial oppression. The Lord declares, I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, and that promise becomes living and active when you move in obedience. I sense many thinking, I want this protection to spread beyond me. This is your moment. Your giving becomes oil strengthening this mission, like reaching homes where hope is fading. This is not simply support. It is participation in deliverance. As you sow, may divine protection intensify over your own resources. Step forward now and let your seed speak on your behalf. Protection establishes stability, but obedience unlocks overflow. There is a difference between surviving and expanding. You can cancel a curse. You can seal your finances. You can guard what you have regained. But if you stop there, you may only experience maintenance. Archangel Michael now speaks about the dimension that moves you beyond stability into sustained provision, financial obedience. Obedience is not control. It is alignment. When your financial life aligns with divine principles, increase flows differently. It flows with structure. It flows with peace. It flows without the constant anxiety of loss. Many desire overflow, but few examine whether their daily decisions reflect alignment with what they are praying for. Ask yourself honestly, do your habits support the breakthrough you declared? If you ask for multiplication but resist stewardship, conflict forms. If you declare abundance but ignore discipline, imbalance appears. Obedience closes that gap. Financial obedience begins with honoring wisdom over impulse. Impulse spending, reactive decisions, emotional financial responses. These are subtle doorways that weaken stability. Discipline may not feel dramatic, but it is powerful. When you choose planning over panic, strategy over stress, and patience over pressure, you create room for growth. Archangel Michael reveals that obedience also includes generosity guided by discernment. Fear says, hold tightly. Protect yourself. Alignment says, steward wisely. Release when instructed. Trust provision. When fear governs, scarcity persists. When obedience governs, provision circulates. This does not mean reckless giving. It means listening carefully. It means refusing to let fear make every decision. It means understanding that resources are meant to flow with wisdom, not stagnate in anxiety. Another dimension of obedience is gratitude. Gratitude is not politeness. It is positioning. When you acknowledge what is already working, you reinforce its stability. When you constantly focus on what is lacking, you magnify absence. Gratitude shifts attention toward growth. It trains your mind to expect continuity instead of collapse. Have you noticed how anxiety about money can consume thought patterns? It can dominate conversations. It can influence tone. It can even affect relationships. Obedience interrupts that cycle by introducing intentional peace. You choose to trust while acting responsibly. You choose to plan without panic. You choose to speak increase instead of anticipating disaster. There is also obedience in consistency. Some people act wisely for a short season, then drift back into old habits once pressure decreases. But consistency determines longevity. Breakthrough sustained requires pattern sustained. Archangel Michael emphasizes that the curse was able to operate because cycles were consistent. Our obedience must become the new consistent cycle. And here is something deeper. Financial obedience is also about identity. You see yourself as someone who can manage increase? Or do you secretly believe that more money would only create more problems? If your identity is still tied to struggle, obedience will feel unnatural. But when you begin seeing yourself as a responsible steward, your decisions shift. Identity shapes behavior. When you view yourself as entrusted rather than deprived, you approach money differently. You track it differently. You protect it differently. You expand it differently. That shift in identity reinforces the protection you established. Now, if this message is resonating, if you recognize that obedience has been the missing bridge between cancellation and overflow, then act on it boldly. Share this message with someone who is praying for financial breakthrough but struggling with discipline. Like this message as a declaration that you choose alignment over impulse. Subscribe and stand in agreement with a community committed not only to breaking curses, but building wisely. Your action is a sign of agreement with expansion. Because obedience multiplies what protection preserves. And here is the retention key you must hear carefully. What you are about to learn next will help you recognize the signs that the curse has truly been canceled. There are indicators. There are signals. There are confirmations that alignment is working. And once you recognize them, your confidence will strengthen. Do not overlook those signs when they appear. Because when peace replaces panic, when opportunity stabilizes instead of collapsing, when income remains instead of disappearing. You must identify it as evidence, not coincidence. Overflow is not accidental. It follows alignment. And alignment begins with obedience. When a curse is canceled, when legal ground is revoked, when protection is established and obedience becomes consistent, something begins to shift. But the shift does not always arrive with fireworks. It does not always announce itself with dramatic headlines. Sometimes the first sign that the curse has been broken is subtle. Archangel Michael reveals that there are indicators, clear, measurable signs, that the cycle has truly been interrupted. The first sign is peace, not the absence of bills, not instant wealth, but peace. A calmness that replaces the constant undercurrent of financial anxiety. Where there was once tension every time you checked your balance, there is now steadiness. Where there was once dread about upcoming expenses, there is now confidence that provision will meet responsibility. Peace is evidence of alignment. The devourer thrives in panic. LA feeds on stress. When those influences lose authority, your internal atmosphere changes. You no longer brace for disaster at every opportunity. You no longer assume collapse is coming. Instead, there is quiet assurance that you are guarded. The second sign is stabilization. Money begins to remain. Not necessarily in massive quantities at first, but consistently. Income arrives and is not immediately consumed by unexpected crises. Emergencies decrease in frequency. Repairs, setbacks, and sudden drains become less chaotic. You begin to notice something remarkable, predictability in a positive direction. Instead of asking, "What will go wrong this time?" you begin asking, "How can I build from here?" That shift in question reflects a shift in reality. The third sign is clarity. Confusion about financial decisions starts to fade. You sense when to move and when to wait. You feel less pressured by impulse. Discernment strengthens. Opportunities that once felt overwhelming now feel manageable. This clarity is not coincidence. It is the result of protection and obedience working together. Archangel Michael emphasizes that clarity is a weapon. When you can see clearly, you avoid traps. When you think clearly, you plan effectively. When you discern clearly, you protect what you build. Another powerful sign is restored opportunity. Doors that previously stalled begin to move forward. Conversations that once collapsed now progress. Payments that were delayed begin arriving on time. Promotions, partnerships, where ideas gain traction instead of resistance. These are not random improvements. They are confirmations. But here is something important. Do not overlook small victories. If you were previously losing money through constant unexpected expenses and now those expenses decrease, that is breakthrough. If you were previously overwhelmed and now you feel structured, that is breakthrough. If you were once anxious and now you feel stable, that is breakthrough. The enemy wants you to ignore incremental progress so you remain dissatisfied. But gratitude reinforces momentum. Here is also a relational sign. Financial stress often strains relationships. Tension rises. Arguments increase. Silence grows heavy. When the curse is canceled and peace returns, relationships begin stabilizing. Communication improves. Decisions become collaborative instead of reactive. Unity strengthens. Provision affects more than your bank account. It affects your environment. Another sign is resilience. When challenges do appear, because life still contains responsibilities, you respond differently. Instead of collapsing into fear, you adjust calmly. Instead of assuming catastrophe, you assess strategically. The difference is not the absence of challenge. It is the absence of panic. Archangel Michael wants you to recognize that resilience is evidence of restoration. You are no longer in survival mode. You are in stewardship mode. And here is a powerful confirmation. Your expectation shifts upward. You begin planning long term. You begin imagining growth instead of just stability. You begin considering investments, expansions, or projects that once felt impossible. Your vision expands because fear no longer caps it. Vision expanding is a sign that limitation has loosened its grip. But remain vigilant. When progress begins, complacency can attempt to creep in. Do not return to careless confession. Do not neglect discipline. Do not assume protection no longer needs reinforcement. Breakthrough must be maintained intentionally. And that leads to the next crucial step. You have canceled. You have protected. You have aligned. You have recognized the signs. Now you must maintain the breakthrough so that what has been restored becomes permanent in a new direction. Not permanent poverty, but permanent stability. Because maintenance determines longevity. And in the next part, you will understand how to guard this restoration so that it does not fade over time. The signs are appearing. Recognize them. Breakthrough is powerful, but maintenance is what makes it lasting. Archangel Michael now brings you to a critical understanding. What has been restored can be sustained, or slowly eroded, depending on what you do next. The curse may be cancelled. The devourer may be rebuked. Protection may be established. But permanence in the right direction requires vigilance. Maintenance begins in the mind. If you return to old thought patterns, you reopen old atmospheres. If you resume speaking defeat over temporary challenges, you weaken the new structure you built. Words are not casual in the spiritual realm. They reinforce direction. They hypnotize. They either strengthen protection or chip away at it. Guard your confession. When a minor financial setback occurs, and at times it will, refuse to label it as a return of the curse. Not every expense is spiritual warfare. Not every challenge is attack. Sometimes life simply requires responsibility. The difference now is that you face responsibility from a place of authority, not fear. Maintenance also requires disciplined habits. You cannot pray for stability while practicing chaos. Continue organizing your finances. Continue tracking your spending. Continue planning intentionally. Structure is not restriction. It is reinforcement. It prevents small leaks from becoming major drains. Archangel Michael emphasizes consistency over intensity. You do not need dramatic declarations every day. You need steady alignment. Daily choices that reflect the new identity you embraced. Consistent gratitude. Consistent wisdom. Consistent stewardship. Another vital key in maintaining breakthrough is avoiding negative agreements. Negative agreements often come through conversations. Be mindful of the environments you engage in. If you surround yourself with constant complaints about money, constant declarations of economic doom, constant hopelessness, it can subtly influence your outlook. Guard your atmosphere. This does not mean isolation. It means discernment. Choose conversation that reinforce growth rather than reinforce fear. Choose counsel that promotes wisdom rather than panic. Maintenance also includes continued generosity guided by wisdom. When fear tries to return, it often attacks through the temptation to hoard. But hoarding from fear reactivates scarcity thinking. Stewardship, on the other hand, balances saving with strategic release. When generosity flows from faith rather than pressure, it strengthens trust. There is another dimension that must not be ignored: emotional discipline. Financial healing includes emotional healing. If past failures once defined you, ensure they do not quietly reattach to your identity. If you once believed you were incapable, do not allow that narrative to resurface. Identity must remain upgraded. You are not the person who tolerated cycles anymore. You are the person who confronted them. You are not the one who accepted lack as destiny. You are the one who canceled it. Reinforce that identity daily. Archangel Michael reveals that sustained breakthrough often requires humility. As stability increases, pride can attempt to slip in unnoticed. Pride says, "I did this alone." Humility says, "I remained aligned and guarded." Pride weakens protection. Humility strengthens it. Stay teachable. Stay alert. Stay grateful. Another maintenance principle is preparation. As your finances stabilize, prepare for growth. Build reserves. Invest wisely. Expand carefully. Preparation ensures that the increase does not overwhelm you. Many lose breakthrough not because of loss, but because of mismanagement during growth. Preparation is protection. And remember this: stability does not mean stagnation. It means foundation. Once foundation is strong, expansion becomes safe. But expansion must be intentional. If fear whispers that the curse might return, counter it immediately. Do not entertain that thought. Fear thrives on imagination. Authority thrives on clarity. You have canceled. You have sealed. You have aligned. Trust what has been established. And here is a powerful truth: maintenance is less dramatic than breakthrough, but it is more powerful long-term. Anyone can feel intense for a moment. Few remain disciplined for a lifetime. Your commitment to maintenance determines whether this moment becomes a memory or a milestone. You are not maintaining poverty. You are maintaining protection. You are maintaining clarity. You are maintaining stewardship. And now, we arrive at the final charge, the closing declaration that seals this entire process and shifts your financial trajectory permanently toward restoration. What you declare next will not just affirm change, it will anchor it. You have reached the final charge, not the end of a message, but the sealing of a decision. Archangel Michael began with urgency because time mattered. The 90 seconds were not about panic. They were about awakening. And now, after revelation, cancellation, protection, obedience, recognition, and maintenance, you stand in a different position than when this message first reached you. You are no longer unaware. You are no longer passive. You are no longer tolerating what once felt normal. This is the moment to seal everything. Understand something deeply. Poverty was never written as your permanent identity. Struggle may have visited. Blame may have lingered. The devourer may have consumed. But none of those were final declarations over your life. They were conditions, not conclusions. And conditions at end. The urgency at the beginning was necessary because cycles harden when ignored. But you did not ignore it. You confronted it. You listened. You aligned. You declared. That matters more than you realize. Archangel Michael's final charge is this: do not return to old agreements. Even when pressure rises, even when responsibilities increase, even when unexpected costs appear, do not interpret temporary challenge as permanent curse. You have already revoked access. You have already sealed protection. You have already aligned with obedience. Stand in that alignment. From this day forward, speak differently about your finances. Expect differently. Plan differently. Guard differently. When increase comes, receive it without fear. When stability settles, embrace it without suspicion. When opportunity appears, step forward without rehearsing collapse. Because what you expect influences what you sustain. Heaven does not rush restoration only to withdraw it. When breakthrough aligns with wisdom and protection, it establishes new normal. And that is what this moment represents. A new normal. A new normal of peace instead of panic. A new normal of structure instead of chaos. A new normal of growth instead of constant repair. You are not destined to endlessly rebuild what keeps collapsing. You are destined to build and see it stand. Let this truth settle in you. Financial restoration is not only about numbers. It is about dignity. It is about relief. It is about freedom to think beyond survival. It is about waking up without the heavy cloud of constant anxiety. That freedom is not selfish. It is stabilizing. When you are stable, you make wiser decisions. When you are peaceful, you create healthier environments. When you are no longer consumed by lack, you can think long-term. That ripple effect matters. Archangel Michael's tone shifts now from urgency to assurance. The battle that required immediate attention has been confronted. The door that needed closing has been shut. The agreement that required cancellation has been revoked. Now assurance speaks. You are guided. You are aligned. You are positioned for restoration. But seal it publicly. Seal it with declaration. Type "My season of abundance begins now" in the comments. Blessing code 909 is now activated. Let the declaration mark this moment, not as emotional hype, but as a recorded decision, a line drawn between what was and what will be. And as this message concludes, understand something powerful. What you have received here is not meant to stop with you. Every revelation released is like piercing financial darkness in homes around the world. When you respond through super thanks, step into membership, or sow through PayPal using the link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are not supporting a channel, you are expanding a rescue mission. The Lord declares, "I will open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing you cannot contain," and that promise activates through obedience. I sense many of you saying within, "I cannot keep this to myself." The stirring is divine. Your seed becomes rain over dry places, oil that keeps this fire burning, provision that carries this message to those still trapped in silent cycles. This is not optional generosity. It is prophetic participation. As you sow, may abundance pursue you, overtake you, and stabilize in your household. Move now and seal this moment with action. This is not the end. This is your turning point. The urgency has passed. The assurance remains. And your financial future has shifted. Amen.